Hey, how's it going everyone? So this video is going to be extremely important for anyone that is running ads, because even if you're not even running ads, you're still going to want to have this information, and it's going to be looking a little bit different, but very, very important. Now, the main thing that I want to highlight on this is that ROAS is not the right way to look at an account. I literally will look at an account with a 0.2x or a like 10% ROAS, and I'll be able to scale it. And the reason for that is because attribution, as you've seen in the previous videos, it doesn't matter, right? It's a mess, and the more that we look at attribution, the more we realize that it's flawed, and people that are looking at ROAS as a metric are way behind the times. I mean, this was being done years ago. We actually have some screenshots too that I'll put up right now, which is just back in 2023, 2024, and so we've been doing this for quite some time now, and the market is still not fully on board with this. So this is very frustrating, and so I want to make sure that everyone understands this, because this is literally going to save your business, and this is literally going to allow you to scale 3x, 4x, 5x over years. And it's literally the most important thing, the first step for this whole entire process. Whenever you're optimizing ads, it will literally allow you to do so much more in sort of strategies, in terms of just being able to scale a business from increasing ad spend and not having it go to the wrong audience. It will teach you way more than these third-party tools will teach you. I don't even use third-party tools really that much anymore, unless it's just a server-side tracking tool to then push different data to the algorithm, or to Google. So that's adding a different type of conversion action. But if you're using things like Triple Whale, or even Northbeam, Wicked Reports, I don't really need to use those. Now, they're nice on a visual standpoint, just to see what your top line metrics are, like this that I'm showing you here. But this is a stitched together way of doing it that works really well, that even publicly traded companies are still doing to this day. And I would highly recommend all business owners to do it, because this is step one inside of the leverage when it comes to ads. So if you don't know what a P&L is, I would highly recommend doing that if you're a business owner. But if you're a marketer, you probably don't know as much about it. That's totally fine. As a business owner, there's a lot more things that come into play. Just think of it as, cost out, cost in, what are my results? That's really all it is. And so this can work for both, lead gen, e-com. This is any kind of business. I'm going to go over e-com first, and then later in the video, I'll go into the lead gen standpoint. So in this picture that I have up right now, this is more so for the marketer. This is not for the business owner, right? So if you're a business owner, you're going to have operating expenses, so OpEx in here, as well as just the overall net profit. This is, that's more of a business, I guess you can say, problem to solve versus a marketing problem to solve. As marketers, our goal is to get you more new customers, and that's really it, right? And so talking to business owners, this comes down to, obviously what the profit margins are, which you should know if you're a business owner, hopefully, because then that will allow you to have better targets for this sheet here, right? So this is a very, very, very simplified version of a P&L for marketers. So I'll go through this really quickly, just to kind of give you guys an understanding of it. So over here, I have the date range. This is just to see trends. So some people will do daily, typically larger brands. Some people will do weekly to see trends, monthly, quarterly, and yearly. People do all those as well. So there's tons of ways to do this. I would say the more the better. You just have to make sure that you're consistent with it. And there are some AI tools that can kind of help with this. So anyways, we're going to show the week by week basis right here. So week 1, October 5th, let's just say, is the starting point. I would even argue that you can you can organize this however you want. This is just a template. So you can say like starting from this day to this day as the date range, doesn't really matter. Google spend, so this is the total spend for this week. The Facebook spend, so this is the total Facebook spend for the week as well. And then the spend total, we spent $3,000 in advertisement. Now, if you have other channels like TikTok or Amazon, or even connected TV, you would want to add this into the mix as well. I would even argue that if you have UGC budget for product seeding, you also want to add this into the mix if they are providing those assets to you in the state range, right? So sometimes it might be a little bit of a lag time where you say instead of this week, you get the actual brand assets a month later or a couple weeks later. It really just depends on the relationship you have with that. The goal of this though is to see the total spend and then the total results of that spend in the date range that you're looking at. We don't want to just have spend go to nothing and have that be calculated in here, because we're trying to see what ads are actually doing for the business as a whole, in order to better diagnose what exactly is going on, and then, obviously get more into the tactical side of it of, fixing the problem there. Cool. So this is traffic. Not as important, but just good to know, kind of a good, I guess you can say, test when it comes to understanding what might be changing over here. So this is just like website traffic, what amount of unique visits you're having to your site for the state range. Website revenue. So I would argue that this is gross revenue, just because you don't want to go too much into the weeds of, figuring out exactly, was this margin good? Was this bad? That's more of a question for the business owner. Now, like I said, this is a very, very, very simplified version of it. So if you have products that have vastly different profit margins, you definitely want to have those broken out. There's tools for this as well too, and things like Lifetimely can do that for you. I know that there's some agents as well, like AI agents that can also help fill this out. But you depending on the range that you're looking at, you can have this be segmented out by product category, or just by general. You could do general profit, but a lot of that comes down to trying to understand what the levers to pull are to generate more profit. So having just a generalized view of profit doesn't necessarily help as much. It's better to compare, all that on the back end metrics that are beyond this as well. So I just do gross revenue just to see overall flow and then have that conversation with the client, but you can add that in here if you would like. New customer revenue. So this is extremely important. I would say that this is probably one of the most important metrics to track, because that's going to give you exactly the type of user coming in and if you're making money on the user or not. So you could put this, and you can argue either way on that, for gross or net. I would say net is probably more of an argument for this, but we just have new customer revenue in here from a general standpoint of like a gross standpoint, but either or. And then website MER. Okay, so this is when we're starting to get a little bit more in depth on what we want to look at, how we're going to measure stuff. So whenever we look at ads, the majority of people look at ads and they say, oh, the ROAS is good, we're doing great. But the reality is it doesn't really give you the total influx of all of your marketing channels. So what I mean by that is that if you increase spend on Google, it might attribute more and say it's doing better, or say it's getting a higher volume, but your overall business efficiency might actually go down, because let's say that instead of Facebook getting the credit for it, it's losing the credit for it, and Google's taking more credit, and you're seeing a 3x inside of Google, a 2x inside of Meta, but then on the back end of your business, you're seeing a 2x global ROAS, I guess you could say. And this happens all the time. It's very, very common, and it's typically in accounts that don't necessarily have a full grasp on this sheet here and understanding what top line metrics are, or an agency that is not necessarily aware of how to fix these problems. And so one of the biggest things is, this is why this is probably one of the most important metrics, is because it gives you a full picture of what to look at on the business health standpoint from the marketing. And then from there, and just to give you the calculations here, so this is the overall revenue from the business. So this could be gross revenue or just general profit, divided by the total spend, right? So if we spent $3,000 and we got $6,000 back, then we're at a 2x MER, media efficiency ratio, right? Because that's the total spend of all the marketing channels. And this, like I said, helps kind of clear up the differences in attribution. So this is 100% accurate. There's no third-party tools in this. And then conversion rate, pretty straightforward on this. Don't need to explain that. New customers. Now, keep in mind, this is global too. This is not just in platform. New customers, also super simple. Now, getting into this other section over here, NCAC and NMER. So NCAC is also referred to as CAC. And this is just how much you're paying for a new customer. So the math in here, when I pull this out, is E2, so new customers is 100 divided by K2, which is the total spend. So if we have 100 customers and we have $3,000 in spend, then we're at a $30 NCAC, meaning that we are paying effectively $30 for a new customer. Now, that's not to say that $3,000 is what you've spent only on new customers. It's the ratio, what we're looking at here, of the total spend is getting us a $30 NCAC, even though maybe $1,000 of that or $2,000 of that is going after repeat customers. That's contributing to this new customer bottom line. So really, really important to understand the relationship between the spend and the NCAC, because that's going to pretty much tell you if your business is dying or not from a funnel perspective. What typically happens is that when people increase spend, they'll see better attribution. So like, for example, I go on Google and I bump this to $5,000, right? And we see more attribution instead of Performance Max. The platform looks like, really good, better ROAS. And then we go over and look at the actual numbers and we're like, wait a minute, our NCAC just went up to $60. What change occurred? Well, the change was we increased Google spend by like $2,000, $3,000. That drove us cleanly into doubling our budget, right? Or doubling our NCAC pretty much, right? And so obviously that's a bad change. So you want to revert back and say, okay, we dropped the Google spend down to, back to where it was, $3,000, or sorry, $2,000. And we get a $30 NCAC. And this is assuming that you're still getting the same amount of new customers, right? You got no more new customers when you scaled up Google. NCAC's obviously going to go up. And so you want to avoid those issues at all costs, because they're going to cause larger issues down the road. So anyways, jumping to NMR, right? So this is a combination of new customers and website MER. So think of this purely as just the revenue that you're getting from new customers and the overall spend, right? So right here we have H2, new customer revenue is $3,000 divided by our total spend, which is $3,000, break even NMR, assuming it's profitability, or that's, profit. That's break even NMR on, for this week per se. And then same thing happens with this. If we increase this to $2,000, we see that our new customer revenue doesn't grow, or it doesn't grow as efficiently as we want it to. Our NMR drops, right? So pretty straightforward there. That's pretty much the general. I would say these other things like orders, just general orders, good things to track. See just the amount of products that you're moving out, and then this is just CAC from a return and new perspective, and then the percent of new buyers. This is based off of all the orders, how much what's the percentage of new buyers that you're getting out of that, right? What's the percentage of new orders to old orders, and then calculated out here. A lot of this can be pulled from Shopify. So if you can't get some of these other metrics, that's fine. I would say that just make sure that if you can get NCAC and NMR, so these three right here, MER, NCAC, and NMR, you'll be fine. That'll solve a lot of your problems when it comes to this P&L sheet. Because I know that some tools, not everyone's running Shopify, and so some tools don't give you as much information. So I highly recommend you get on Shopify, but anyways, I'll digress, right? So that's kind of the e-commerce side of things. This gives you a free starting point. It just takes, sweat equity of just going in and pretty much just making sure that you have this filled out on a weekly or bi-weekly or even monthly basis, just so you can see a trend. And then over here, obviously, you can add notes. I'll even put something right here, right? So if we made a change and increased spend by $1,000, we want to see how that affects the next week and the week prior, so we can then track exactly what we did and then what change occurred on the back end of the business. So like I said, this is a very, very basic beginning of tracking these numbers, and then it will kind of translate into more and more complex ways of doing things, which goes into benchmarking and all that fun stuff. But we're gonna stay away from that for now. Okay, so the other one is lead gen. So it's very, very similar. However, there is a little bit more information that's not really given to or I guess responsibility put on the marketer. It's more so put on the salespeople, which is good and bad as marketers. I mean, I'm a marketer myself, and so it's very frustrating when that you're getting really good leads and then the follow-up sequence is not working well. There's some issue on the sales side that needs to be solved, and so you're kind of held in stasis. This is what most people complain about whenever they're in marketing and the lead gen side. But I will say that when you are in a scenario where both the marketer is really good and the sales team is killer, it just becomes a total blue ocean, because it's very hard for teams to do that. So anyways, going into the specific metrics, so it's very similar to the other one. So there's date ranges here. You can add another column for week if you want it to look exactly similar to the other one. So we'll just say 7 days here, Google spent $500, Facebook spent $5,000, total spend is $5,500. We got 10 leads out of that. Our cost per lead is $550. So a quick caveat on this. So lead generation, typically you don't have repeat customers go through the sales process again. So we don't track that in most scenarios. However, there is some unique SaaS product scenarios, which I would argue is more on the e-com side, but there are some unique scenarios where you might have to resell someone again, but we're assuming that if you're a brand, you're probably getting 99% one-time purchasers that are just kind of coming through and saying, hey, I need, my house repiped, or I need to have a product, or I need to have a pest control person out, or I need to, whatever the case is, like buy this, installation for my backyard kind of thing. And so it's not really something that you'd want to go back and buy again and again. It would come back organically and years down the line. But if you're good, they won't, be asking you for help again and replacing the product and having a bad review. So anyways, or the service. So anyways, with that being said, so this is the cost per lead. Pretty straightforward. It's just the total spend divided by the amount of leads. So if we spent $5,500, we got 10 leads, we're paying $550 per lead. If we have if we close 5 out of those 10, then it's a 50% close rate, right? So super easy calculation there, right? H2 divided by E2, just so we can exactly see what the sales team is doing or how the lead quality is. Now, lead quality is probably going to be the main conversation that you're going to be having with your agency or your team or just marketing in general. And so what that means is that this information here needs to have a lot of notes on it, and there needs to be a lot of communication, because a lot of the tactics that agencies or just paid media specialists do in the first place should be geared towards better understanding if it's a sales team issue or if it's a targeting issue. And that's a very, very complex topic, but I'll say that it typically comes down to two things. Either the targeting is awful, meaning that you're going after a lot of spam leads, and so this this might look more like this let's just say 100 leads, and so you're like, oh my god, I'm getting an amazing cost per lead, but then their close rate is like 5%, and so that's indicative of obviously bad targeting and spam leads. And then if you're in a scenario where the sales team is really bad, you might find that, you got them, let's say 20 leads, and we know that they're highly qualified leads, and the sales team still only closed 5. And you could verify that by either if they're, missed calls, people that aren't picking up the phone from those missed calls, or if, they hop on the phone and either the offer isn't working as well on like the end of the close, or the sales team is just not able to fully convey the value of your services to the person. And so that's typically one of those two issues that comes into play, but this is sort of the basics on how you diagnose that. And then as we go further over here, we have our total cost per sold lead, which is $1,100. Now we obviously want to get further onto the total lead value sold. This is going to be typically a very long delay, just because service-based industries don't necessarily have like, hey, here we go, like within 2 seconds you have the product shipped and paid for and everything kind of thing. And so this will probably be a very long lag. So I don't necessarily look as much into the total lead value sold for this specific date range. The way that I like to look at it is that if we have a qualified lead that's good, then I mark that off as, okay, on marketing, we're doing great, we're doing awesome, let's keep scaling. If we're in a scenario where we have qualified leads that are really good in the pipeline, but they're not closing, then that's obviously a sales team issue. So there is an argument to add in, so like for right here, you can change leads to qualified leads. I just left that as leads because I don't know if this is gonna be, this is a template that I give to people. And so I don't know if people are gonna rate the leads or not in this column here. So you could change this or add a qualified lead and be cost per qualified lead to better understand that if you have a team that's rating that. But yeah, I would say that is probably one of the most important things on the marketing side of it. And then obviously as a business owner, understand your cost per lead sold. And then as a marketer, you're obviously wanting to have the business grow. And so what we end up finding ourselves do is help with the sales team, help give them information on, what we're noticing that they could sell, and maybe have more of an alignment to where the sales team is knowing what we're advertising, and we're sort of prepping them even more, trying to serve it up on a silver platter is sort of the goal of the marketing team for the sales team, because it makes people happy, people stay longer for the team over that or the sales team over there, or whatever client they're working with, and it just makes things a lot better. And then over here, notes for changes, pretty straightforward. If we increase, or I pause brand terms, let's just say, right? We might see that our cost per lead drops, but our actual closed lead stays the same, right? So we might get, instead of getting 20 leads, we get 15 leads. So then our cost per lead goes up, but our cost per sold lead stays at, 1,100. And what that typically means is that you're just going after, instead of having unrated leads be return users, you're going after, ideally in the best case scenario, importing in qualified leads only. If your team is not importing in qualified leads, have a chat with them, because that's extremely important, and I'll have another video on that in the future. But I think that is probably one of the most important things whenever you're running lead gen, is not importing all the leads, import only quality leads. So anyways, I know this is kind of a long-winded video, and I think this is, it's deserving of all the information in it, because I know that this is step one in how you actually grow a business. If you're not doing this, you're not going to grow the business. It's that simple. You might have some luck and be okay for a period of time, but people are just going to come and take your lunch, and you're going to run into an issue where someone has a better offer, better sales team, better marketing, better messaging, a better flow, better customer service, whatever the case is, and you're not going to know your numbers, and so you're not really going to know until it's too late on if you're actually profitable or not. So highly recommend this, and this helps marketing teams tremendously better understand what is going on. So anyways, thanks again for watching this video. I'll see you guys in the next one.